Welcome back to Superstition Mountain. In today's video I want to talk a little bit about wrist conditions. So first thing I want to talk about the anatomical terms of how they move. So radial, ulnar, extension, flexion. Okay. Now what I want to talk about is I want to talk about what happens from the top of our swings and why. So I've heard from a lot of golf instructors how in transition you want to add extension from your right wrist, flexion in your left wrist, and ulnar deviation in transition. Now in my opinion that's not quite correct. Ulnar does happen in the golf swing, but it happens later. For me, the ulnar happens down in here when the momentum of the club starts to extend your arms, and it pulls your arms into this position. And it's not really voluntary, it's something that just happens. It's a result of physics.
Here we have an example of two tour players. One is a very long hitter on tour and the other is a fairly average hitter. But what you'll notice is some commonalities. As they change directions, both of them gain hinge in their wrists in transition, and they continue gaining hinge in their wrists until they reach about left arm parallel. And then that hinge begins to unload. So this is a common trait. If your pivot is working correctly, it's almost impossible for you to gain ulnar deviation in transition.
So what happens, in my opinion, is mainly created by our pivot. So we all get to the top, we're going to have different geometry based on our grips. So if I have a really strong grip, when I reach the top of my backswing, most likely I'm going to have a little bit of cupping in my left wrist. If I have a really weak grip, most likely I'm going to have a fairly flat left wrist and maybe even a little bit of flexion in my left wrist. Now what happens as I transition is wherever I'm at, so let's say I'm a really strong grip, as I begin to unwind my body, what happened? Well, the momentum of that golf club, the weight of that golf club, I should say, so I reach the top of my swing with a really strong grip and I start to unwind, the weight of that golf club wants to add extension in my right wrist and relative flexion in my left wrist, which, because my left wrist was extended at the top, because of how strong it was, it becomes a little bit more flat. Okay? Now if my grip was more neutral, as I transition, my right wrist is going to get extended again, and my left wrist is going to become flexed a little bit. And in each of these cases, my wrists are going to gain radial deviation because of the weight of that golf club doesn't want to move early in transition, so I'm going to gain a little bit of radial in transition. Unless my transition is mainly a lateral motion, then I could actually gain ulnar. But if your pivot is more rotational, physics aren't going to allow it. So you're going to be seeing a gain in radial deviation, flexion in the right wrist, or extension in the right wrist and flexion in the left wrist. And it's almost all created by the pivoting of the body. So when I unwind, if I'm relaxed in my arms, in my wrists, and I start to unwind, you can see what effect that has on the golf club. As long as I'm not pulling down on the club, that's going to steepen the club and actually put extension in the left wrist. But if my hands are kind of passive, as I begin to unwind correctly, you can see what result that had. So again, what your wrists do is mainly predicated on how your pivot works. and where you're at structurally at the top of your backswing.